No retirement, no medicine, no dentures, no glasses, no cane. In a world where eating meant hunting, walking for miles, and seen far into the distance, what happened to the ones who grew old, whose bodies stopped keeping up? The answer most people picture is brutal. They got left behind, so the young could survive. And for a long time, even scientists assumed the same. Then the bones started showing up, and the bones tell a far more complicated story, a far more human one. It begins with a man who didn't have a single tooth left in his mouth. Before the bones, let's kill a myth together. You've probably heard that in prehistoric times, people only lived to about 30. It sounds grim, and it's almost completely misunderstood. That number is an average, and averages lie when death is uneven. Picture two children born on the same day. One dies at age 1, the other lives to 70. The average lifespan of those two is 35, yet neither of them died anywhere near 35. That is exactly what happened across prehistory. Infant mortality was brutal, and it dragged the whole average down. But those who survived childhood had a real shot at reaching 60, even 70. Which means every tribe had its old people. White-haired, worn-kneed, weak-eyed, sitting at the same fire as the 20-year-old hunters. Old age isn't a modern invention. It was always there. And that turns the question in the title into a real one. What did a tribe, living on the edge of survival, do with someone who couldn't provide anymore? The oldest answer we have is almost unbelievable, and it is 1.8 million years old. Dmanisi, in Georgia, in the Caucasus Mountains. Digging through a site 1.8 million years old, archaeologists found the skull of an early human, already old for his kind, with one feature that stopped the scientific community cold. He had almost no teeth. Just a single one was left. And here's the detail that changes everything. The sockets, the empty holes where the teeth used to sit, had closed, healed, and grown over with fresh bone. That takes years. This man lived for years after losing his last chewing tooth. Now sit with that. 1.8 million years ago, long before our own species even existed, there was no guaranteed fire, no pot, no soup, no soft food waiting anywhere. How does someone who cannot chew survive for years on tough roots and raw meat? Some scientists give the tender answer. He doesn't. Not alone. Someone softened his food. Someone chose every single day for years to feed an old man who could no longer hunt. Others are more careful. Maybe he scraped by on marrow, soft fruit, and the brains of hunted animals, the few foods a toothless mouth can handle. The argument is still open. But 1.5 million years later, another case appeared. And in that one, the room for doubt is far, far smaller. The same cave of Shanidar, in the mountains of northern Iraq, the one famous for burials laid with flowers. A Neanderthal skeleton, catalogued as Shanidar 1, belonged to a man who died between 40 and 50, an elder for his time. And his body is a map of old wounds. A heavy blow had crushed the left side of his face, most likely blinding one eye. His right arm had withered to a useless stump and may have been amputated. Growths of bone inside his ears would have left him nearly deaf. His legs, fractured and stiff with arthritis, could barely carry him across the ground. And here is the key. None of these injuries were fresh. They had all healed over. He lived like this for decades. A man nearly blind, nearly deaf, with one working arm and a ruined leg, in a world prowled by cave lions, cannot hunt, cannot gather, cannot run from anything. There was only one way this man reached old age. The tribe carried him. Food, shelter, protection for decades, until he died an old man and was buried with unmistakable care. And if you're tempted to file that under simple charity, you're missing the most beautiful piece of the whole puzzle. The old were not a burden the tribe generously chose to carry. They were, in the coldest evolutionary terms, a competitive advantage. Think about what a 65-year-old carries inside their head in a world with no writing and no maps of any kind. He has already lived through the drought that only returns once a generation, and he remembers exactly where the water still held. She knows which plant breaks a fever and which plant stops a heart, which valley floods in the rains, what the worst winter in 50 years looked like, and how people survived it. Before there was a book, the old person was the book. When an elder died, it was a library burning to the ground, and evolution seems to have taken that loss seriously. Menopause is a real biological mystery. Almost no animal on Earth lives for decades after it can no longer reproduce. Humans are the striking exception. The best explanation came from watching the Hadza, hunter-gatherers in Tanzania. It is the grandmothers. A grandmother who gathers food frees her daughter to have the next child sooner, and she keeps the older, weaned children fed and alive. That one contribution lifts the survival of the entire family so much that nature actually rewarded living long past the final pregnancy. Your grandmother exists, biologically speaking, because grandmothers kept children alive. But it would be dishonest to end the story there, on that warm note, because it did not always work out. There are accounts gathered from nomadic peoples of the frozen Arctic and the harshest deserts of times of extreme famine when an elder was left behind, in the terrible moment when the whole group had to keep moving or die together. Pop culture has fallen in love with that image and stretched it far out of shape. The records themselves tell a quieter truth. It was rare. It was the very last resort, and it was lived as a tragedy, never as a casual custom. And in many of those accounts, it was the old person who made the choice, who insisted on staying behind, so as not to cost the lives of the grandchildren. An impossible choice, made with a breaking heart, on the kind of day when no good choice existed at all. And it is exactly that contrast that finally answers the question in the title. If leaving the old behind had been the rule, the bones of Dmanisi and of Shanidar would not exist. They exist because the real rule, on the overwhelming majority of days across our history, was the opposite one. We stayed. So here is the answer, at last. What happened to the ones too old to survive? They didn't survive. Not on their own. They were survived. By the tribe, by their children, by the grandchildren they had helped to raise, and by the stories they told around the fire long into the night. Respect for the people who grew old is not mere etiquette, and it is not some recent invention of religion. It is one of the oldest survival technologies our species ever built. So when you call your grandmother, when you sit through the same story from your grandfather for the 10th time, you are keeping alive the oldest agreement in all of human history. Whoever carried you at the beginning, you carry at the end. We have talked about the very end of life. We still owe you the other extreme, and somehow it was even more dangerous. So next time, how did anyone survive the single deadliest day of ancient existence? The day of being born. No hospital, no doctor, no medicine at all. How did our species come through that over and over for 300,000 years? Subscribe to Ever Wonder and keep wondering.